Good, yeah. Um, so hi everyone, welcome to our virtual Ask Me Anything with our Luminary Labs CEO, Sara Holoubek. We're super excited to be here with you guys um, and to answer a few of some questions that we've received beforehand. But we've also been just really thrilled to connect with different people in various industries to not only learn about what they do, but also give a little bit more information about us. So in terms of housekeeping items, we are recording the session and we'll be including a summary of it in our lab report, which is the Luminary Labs newsletter, which you can sign up for on our website. We also, as you guys may know, love crowdsourcing. So we had asked our extended network before this AMA to share their questions about what it's like to work at Luminary Labs, what our teams are like, what our work culture is like. So we will be trying to get to all of the questions that were submitted in advance, but still definitely feel free to use the Q&A function so we can hopefully answer your questions as well. So before we get started, my name is Naomi. I'm currently one of the senior communications associates at Luminary Labs. I'm almost about to hit my 1 year mark. So really thrilled to be here with Sara, and I'll let Sara introduce herself and kind of give a little background for why we decided to do this today.
Thanks, Naomi. I'm Sara Holoubek. I'm the CEO and founder of Luminary Labs. And thank you so very much for joining my very first AMA. I've never done this. And, it really came about because I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I got a Google alert for Luminary Labs. And it was from Fishbowl, which is a platform where consultants and other folks can ask questions about other companies anonymously. And the question was, does anyone work at Luminary Labs, and what are the actual deliverables you produce? And I found that so interesting because despite long job descriptions and interviews, rarely does a company actually say, like, this is what your day-to-day looks like. And it occurred to me that maybe somebody else might have that question or a different question. And so I was chatting with Jessica, who's our head of content and community, and she's also the editor of our lab report newsletter. We said, well, we love crowdsourcing. What other questions might people have? And that brings us to today. So I'm really excited to answer any questions you have about Luminary Labs, whether it's from a potential candidate perspective, a partner perspective, or client perspective, or you're just curious and you're part of this ecosystem.
Absolutely. And we do have a few open roles currently. So we'll also be dropping in the link to that part of our website. So you can check out the roles and either apply for them yourself or pass them along to someone who may be interested in our work. But to get our conversation started, very famously, we're known that thorny problems are our strong suit. So Sara, what actually makes a problem thorny?
I think it was actually Jana Gilbert, our president, who came up with the term a thorny problem. She's like, we really like thorny problems. And, immediately I was like, that's it. That's our strong suit. So for me, a thorny problem is one where there are multiple stakeholders and the answers aren't obvious. Wicked problems would be another way of describing it. We can't solve chronic disease with like one fell swoop. There are many different aspects. You have to turn the problem around and figure out exactly where you want to start and the type of impact you want to have. And so when we say thorny problems at Luminary Labs, we mean problems across the focus areas we work in, which are the future of health, the future of work and education, scientific discovery, and infrastructure at this point in time. That's a relatively new thing. We put that cap on those 4 focus areas last fall. Prior to that, if you asked me about any problem, I would have gotten excited about it and sort of have an internal barometer as to whether it was right for Luminary Labs. And it occurred to us that we had such a great track record in health. That was a fairly obvious one, education and work as well. But we had this burgeoning scientific discovery practice and then infrastructure. So much of our education and future of work portfolio really lent itself to infrastructure as well.
So given all the various industries that we work with and also just the different clients that we work with, what does success look like for LL, and how do you kind of go about prioritizing all these amazing projects and being able to see all of them through?
It's a very good question. There's success for the client and then success for the company. Like what are we proud of? And one analogy I often use is that as a small and mighty firms or a small woman-owned business that has this enormous privilege and opportunity to work on really large initiatives, we look a little bit more like an architecture firm that's responsible for building new buildings and changing the skyline, for example. And so when I think about success, it's how do we change the skyline in a thoughtful way? How is it additive? How is it supportive? And how can we make sure those buildings still stand? So innovation that can withstand the turbulence of change is really important to me. So there might be a win for the client, but that win might inspire another client or somebody else in the industry to continue that long game of innovation in a particular space. So I'm less interested in, this might sound a little too offhand or shoot from the hip, but like I'm less interested in revenue for revenue's sake, and I'm more interested in engagements that move the needle, both for the client and within an industry at large.
Thanks for sharing that. And another thing that kind of goes along with what we've been talking about is success in terms of work culture as well. A lot of people are at the point of their career where they're possibly looking for a new opportunity. So can you talk a little bit about how at Luminary Labs we've been thinking about sustaining collaboration in this ever-changing work environment, especially as we've kind of moved to this now hybrid approach?
That is also a very good question. I think everyone's trying to figure that out. We all know what place-based work looked like before, and some people were already early adopters of remote. We know what fully remote looks like, and hybrid's in the middle. And I do firmly believe that every organization needs to decide what is right for it based on the type of work, the type of role, the type of clients. And so where we settled at Luminary Labs is that we have 2 days that are in office together in New York City, based on the feedback the team gave us. So, we said 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and 2 is where folks netted out. But it was really more about the why. It's not about the number of the days. It's about when does that place matter? And I thought it was interesting. Folks wanted to meet each other. They wanted to talk with folks that weren't on their team. So let's say you're working on an education project and you really want to compare notes with somebody working on a scientific discovery project, that it really embodies that connectedness that you find at Luminary Labs. We also like each other. I think everyone's like really convivial and we like to eat together and spend time. And so I think sustaining collaboration for us really comes down to knowing when place matters and then designing the days for collaboration. Now, it's not a perfect science. You might have a client that wants to meet you on a collaboration day. And that actually happened. Like in the last few weeks, we've had 2 clients. We were very fortunate that they were able to visit our offices. And so you might need to change your schedule a little bit. But I think there are a couple other things that we put in place that have been very, very helpful. And some are actually longstanding traditions. They go back 5, 6, 7 years. The company is going to be 13 this year. And so we have this tradition of gather. So every Wednesday, for as long as I can remember, it's grab coffee, tea, breakfast, and we're going to share out. It could be share what you're working on. It could be a skill. It could be a conference you went to. And that's time for the team. During that time, we will rarely, we've ever had to cancel it for a client meeting. It just always works out. And so that's a tradition. We also have always had this idea of heads down time. And I think this goes back at least 5 years as well, where we realized that we needed to rethink meetings. How long should a meeting be? Like if you can do it in 15, don't book an hour. If you need an hour, make sure you have everybody's full attention. And in order to do that, you also need to have heads down time where no meetings happen. And as a small company, we can actually do that synchronously. And so we found that synchronous heads down time where no meetings happen is just magical. We do come into the office Tuesdays and Wednesdays, which means that those days you're going pretty full speed. You might have breaks here and there, but to then create that space for heads down, Monday afternoon from 3 to 6 is heads down. Thursday morning before noon is heads down. And a more recent addition the past few years was heads down from 9 to 10 a.m. on Monday. And I don't think I'll ever go back to having a Monday 9 a.m. meeting again. So I think that that's been really helpful to really supporting collaboration and making sure that it's not just about like showing up to show up, but to design for when place matters.
Absolutely. I think the makeup of a Luminary Labs employees day is very unique, and just the intentionality, especially with our heads down time and our gather, which I love, one of my favorite parts of my week. Um, so I think those things are very, very much Luminary Labs things. Um, but I think also aside from the actual, where our time is going day to day, also a lot of people are having conversations about what are we actually doing when we're in the office versus when we're at home, or wherever we are in this hybrid model. So do you mind speaking a little bit maybe to what are our desired outcomes and priorities when we're on site?
This is also a really interesting question. I think somebody wanted to know how is success measured in a hybrid environment? And I say the biggest picture, like success is measured the same way, right? Do we have impact for our clients, and are we bringing that magic? We are a services company, so we do keep client hours as like really different from like if we were like if you worked in a hospital, you have to keep like whatever your shift hours are, or if you're a developer or a writer, you might have more flexibility because maybe your time is more independent if you're an independent or individual contributor. So we have this angle of like, we have to keep client hours, right? And we like keeping client hours. I'll be really honest, like I love keeping client hours because then in the evening it's to myself. But we also know that life happens. So how do you design this model where you've got client hours and life happens? Some roles have more flexibility, but we really try to think about the shared principles that make it possible. So success for me in a hybrid environment is delivering impact, and we do it through three things. So one principle is transparency, being really candid about your calendar. So you're taking your dog out for a walk for like a half an hour or lunch or whatever, just drop it in. Like if we, how can we reach you? Like I might say I'm picking up my kid and, I'm available for a phone call or Slack, but not available for a meeting, and people will actually get specific. So that we're really, really transparent. And you think about like in the before times, people just did things and it was like, you were afraid, right? And you shouldn't be afraid. Like there should be no fear. But that transparency is less about micromanagement. It's more about like, just making sure we know when to reach people and how. Like if you're going to be on an airplane or whatever it might be, just be transparent. Mutual respect. So because life happens, that's one thing, but also now we can design around life happening. So you see a lot more parents picking their kids up, right? Or you see, just a shift in like, well, I can do this a little later because somebody's not waiting on it right now. So I'm going to move my day around a little bit. And that's the second principle, which is mutual respect. Thinking about not just what my needs are. It's like, I think, okay, I need to do this, but Naomi's waiting for me for this one thing. So I'm going to make sure I do it so that when she's ready, she can pick it up. And then the last one is trust. Like we're going to trust that everyone's going to do what they say. And that goes both ways. So we introduced those last fall when we went back to the office in a hybrid fashion. We also, like many, we then closed when an Omicron hit, and we know like none of us know what the world looks like in the future. And we're very grateful to have like the best of being together and the best of hybrid and remote. We also have some roles that have more flexibility and are fully remote, and that's on a case-by-case basis, but typically not our primary consulting roles, right? So we have operations staff and folks in other support roles. Keeping in mind that like not everybody could be remote. So like your office manager, needs to, support the office. So we try to take that into account and make sure that everything is equitably done and mindful of the role, and that we're very clear upfront when you apply for a role, what the expectations are.
So going off a little bit on that, we also have multiple projects that we're always working on. So can you maybe discuss a little bit more about how we decide to structure our project teams, and then how we think about managing working hours across those teams?
Right. So how is a project team structured? Like many consultancies, we have roles that create, I guess, a ladder, as it were. So you have an associate, senior associate, engagement manager, director, senior director, and then up to your senior leadership. And that's your classic consulting pathway. Communications mirrors that. We also have design and insights roles, and then operational roles, and our content and community team. And so when we're structuring a team, there's typically a combination of associate, senior associate, depends on how big it is. The drivers are complexity and length. and an engagement manager, a director, and then ultimately either Jan or I are typically tagged to any project. But the effort or the number of people in that quote unquote stack really depend upon the project itself. So let's say you have a very short, rapid engagement that's heavy on analysis. A senior associate could be leading that, maybe with a director. You might have a project that is like 3 years long, very deep, and it's a full stack. Maybe you have 2 associates and additional hours or subject matter experts. So it just depends. So how do you manage the working hours? So there's this team stack, but we are really big fans of right-sizing jobs. So in order to have the greatest impact, we have to be very thoughtful about how an engagement unfolds over time. And again, when we think about the team configuration, we are really striving to think about like the phases, the deliverables, the workload, and that actually starts during business development. And I oftentimes tell folks when they're supporting business development and scoping something out, I'm like, it's like that whole expression of like, you make your bed, you lie in it, like the or the world is your oyster is another way of saying it. You get to determine what that future is. And so let's be very thoughtful. Pressure test. Is 2 weeks too long? Is it not enough? And I really love that. I think once you get your hands dirty and you scope a few times, you work on projects, you start to think about contingencies and what that can look like. I will say that a few decades of working in services like myself, you start to know this like the back of your hand, you know roughly how long it'll take to do a particular exercise, and then what might be different for a client based on the need. We do time track, and that's really more for us to understand, how are we all doing? What's the temperature at the company? Are we running too hard? Does somebody have some extra time? For example, like let's say somebody's going to go out on family leave. We're taking a look at resourcing and who might be able to plug in. I think during COVID in particular, it's really helpful because the world has been so uncertain in terms of, when people are in and out, like how do we pitch in and how do we get everyone like keep your back, right? I got your back. We also look at trends over time. I think that's helpful. If you have lookalike projects, you can also guesstimate better. And I'm sharing all of this because that's how we manage working hours. And, if somebody's working too many hours or not enough hours, then we have a conversation and somebody might say like, you're right. Like I actually have some extra time. I'm really eager. What else can I do? And somebody else might say, I've got to pump the brakes. And ideally we can see that before somebody has to ask.
Thank you for sharing that. One of the questions that we also received was relating to how our projects can stay effective and how we're effective in preventing groupthink while elevating the quality of our ideas or solution generation, especially for our open innovation projects. So maybe you can also give a little bit of background on open innovation for people who may not know.
Oh, this is one of my favorite topics, open innovation. So if you think about it, the 20th century really prioritized intellectual property and keeping research and development under lock and key. It's the proverbial castle in the sky. And in the 21st century, collaboration is the new competition. And this idea of open innovation, which Henry Chesbrough introduced many years ago, about 15 or so years ago, initially was around the bidirectional flows of information. So how do you open up? And we at Luminary Labs, we do a number of things. So classic strategy and analysis, helping clients place big bets or figure out a direction. We bring products and services to life. So you can think about like design research, rapid prototyping, operationalization. And then we have the third area, which is open innovation. So we have this thriving open innovation practice. And through this, we actually combine those two previous capabilities and then stand up a large scale open innovation program. That could mean an accelerator, it can mean a prize competition, it could mean a piloting exercise, one where rather than keeping this under lock and key, we're opening it up. However, even by opening up, there is a crowd. There are people who are participating. And this is a really great question. Like you could have groupthink. So one of the ways that we avoid that, especially when we're looking at the quality of ideas and solutions, is to start with the art of problem definition. So I'm a huge fan of problem definition as well. So a good problem is what we would call a Goldilocks problem. It is broad enough to stimulate the market without being prescriptive about how you get there. So you should be able to, if you define the problem and you develop criteria and an evaluation rubric that have latitude to compare apples and oranges, you should be able to really stimulate the market to have a breadth of ideas so that they don't all look alike. And I would say if we had a program where everything looked the same, I agree that would be failure. You can read a little bit more about the art of problem definition, how that manifests, and a number of other case studies and ways of working from Luminary Labs from a chapter that I authored a few years ago, which I believe might be dropped in the chat shortly. So the other thing I'll add is I'm a huge fan of checking ourselves. So it's very easy, like even when you're tasked with something like wildly innovative, to return to standard operating procedures. Like every company does it. And there's this like wonderful article that came out, I think it was like in McKinsey Quarterly. The two authors, I believe they have their own consultancy now around leadership. It's called Delighting in the Possible. And they give you these frameworks, these questions to ask yourself. And one of them is, what might I be discounting, right? Like, what might I be assuming is true that isn't actually true? And when doing something wildly innovative or looking to identify innovative solutions, making sure we really understand the motivations and behaviors of people to participate and ensure that we're not just going after a known solver base, for example, or a known set of solutions. My favorite solutions are the ones that come from like the fringes of the ecosystem, analogous spaces, where you have to actually help somebody see themselves in this problem. And that happens quite a lot, especially in scientific discovery. People will say, well, I don't know anything about measuring the Earth's magnetism. Why are you reaching out to us? And we say, yeah, but you know a lot about commercial space and you have things in outer space. And if you had a magnetometer that you could incorporate into what you do, maybe you could measure the Earth's magnetism. Now, you're probably saying, Sarah, what are you talking about? That program is called MagQuest. You can read all about it on magquest.com. But basically, the idea was rather than reaching out to the people who are already doing this type of work, let's go find the folks in the commercial space arena and beyond who have wild ideas to solve it.
So this kind of goes into my next question, because although we have incredible employees at LL, we have extremely smart teams, teams who have come from multiple different backgrounds. Sometimes we do partner with external experts. So do you mind just speaking a little bit to how we kind of go about of when we do reach out to subject matter experts and what stage of the project we end up doing that?
I mean, we all the time.
A trick question.
It's such a great question, right? We talk to subject matter experts just for fun when we want to learn about a space. But even I would say during the business development process, let's say we have a really interesting request for proposal or a client that wants us to look into something. The first thing we do is we call really smart people who might have some ideas and they introduce us to more smart people. And it's just this wonderful exploration. And if we end up winning the engagement, oftentimes our research, our landscape analysis, environmental analysis, whatever format that first deliverable takes, includes a lot of subject matter expert interviews, as well as maybe like a meeting of the minds or roundtable. We also define experts broadly. Yes, it could be somebody with a PhD. It could also be a teacher or a student or a parent, a patient, right? And so we want to know about lived experience as well as learned experience. And so we do it all the time. If people are interested in being like part of our programs as an expert, we have a listserv called Open Innovation at LL, OI at LL. We oftentimes send out, I'd say like once every few months, like when we're working on something, we're looking for experts or when we're launching a new program that folks might want to be engaged in.
So given all of the incredible people that we work with and our amazing projects, what is one current challenge within open innovation that you're really looking forward to?
A challenge in open innovation that I'm looking forward to.
I know there are so many, and it's very difficult to narrow down, but maybe a couple that you could share that
like focus areas, topics, or open in it like
maybe like one issue that you're
issue.
personally passionate
Mhm.
about at the moment.
Okay, so infrastructure is so exciting, and we can nerd out about anything at Luminary Labs. And there is just so much political, financial, and social will right now to improve infrastructure. I would love to work on lead, um, like remediation, detection, anything like we're laying down lots of pipes, right? There's a lot of money to like rethink everything. Like, let's do this in a better way. I think mobility is another one. Like, that's a huge opportunity for open innovation. Um, you might have heard that the EPA issued this notice around PFAS. These are these um, forever chemicals in water. And we need to work on that yesterday. That to me is, we need to figure out one, how to detect better, what to do if you have it in your water, maybe even like a material science open innovation program to like reinvent, come up with new ways of, I think a lot of it comes from like gum wrappers and things like that, right? Or fire retardant materials and so on and so forth. So I think that anything um, where infrastructure and science kind of come together, really exciting. I think there's gonna be a lot in the COVID space. Long COVID really deserves more open innovation. There's so much out there right now and people's lived experiences. We should be crowdsourcing that as well as potential solutions. I'm sorry, I could go on and on. Is that it? I
Yeah, no, I think that that's a wonderful share, and it touches on a lot of points that we discuss almost every day at LL because we are always interested in a new challenge. And I think just the ability to try something new, as Sarah mentioned earlier as well. Um, so kind of now pivoting towards our team and new employees who may join. In your experience and kind of as you've seen the team grow, what are some commonalities shared amongst our Luminary Labs employees that you see has helped them be very successful over the years?
we recently revisited our values, and I would say that um, while we don't ask individuals to hold these as their personal values, when you join Luminary Labs, you're most likely somebody who will embrace them in the organization and uphold and support them. And I love these values. I think asking questions is a big one. So curiosity is a value of ours. We ask a lot of questions. Our clients will tell you that. Everyone will tell you that. I love the curiosity, the fascination with the world around us. We also ask questions when we're not sure what something looks like to clarify. And that's how we can be thoughtful and considered, which is another value. Like, we make decisions by assessing what we know about the situation. And thoughtful and considered can mean how we scope out a project, but it could also mean asking a candidate, like, is this room cool enough for you or warm enough for you? Just being thoughtful. Um, I think that desire to have impact is, I mean, that's the number one value everybody shares. We asked our team when we revisited these, and impact came up across the board. And we love that impact can mean many things. It can mean um, quality of the work. It can mean the social impact. It can mean um, the depth of I mean, many things, right? Just getting it done, right? Making it real. And so I think having a desire to have impact. And, also there's this aspect around being bold and brave that comes with that. So doing things even when they are hard, right? Like rolling up our sleeves and saying, okay, I have no idea how to solve this thorny problem, this wicked problem, or this aspect of it, but I'm going to jump in and I'm going to figure it out. And I think another thing that's like a little bit more recent, we revisited like how we engage with each other and how do we truth tell in a way that is supportive to the world. A lot of people tell us like, you guys are truth tellers. We're like, that's so interesting. So how do we do that internally? And so we added a value around being totally honest and totally kind. So we don't find that those are at odds with each other. It's like we give a damn and we care. So we'll be totally honest to each other, but also to a client. Like if a client wants to take a path and based on our experience, we think it's not the right decision, we'll very thoughtfully and kindly share why. It's ultimately their decision. But I think these types of values are the things that, and I'm just like smiling because it's just the kindest, most thoughtful crew ever. Super nerdy. That's also not quite a value, it's more of an attribute, but those are the things that I think our employees all share. And that's how they are successful, right? Leaning into our values.
I think all these processes also really touch on collaboration. I think even rewriting our values was such a collaborative process amongst all of the employees and the rest of our team at LL. And just being able to be in a place where you can question a lot of things and a lot of the processes that come to where we are. We do have a lot of new employees currently, so being able to explain what is the thought process behind specific decisions that have been made, and also being able to be transparent in terms of where we see ourselves going and how our values can help us achieve those goals as well.
Well, Naomi, I'm so glad you raised that because the team totally pitched in. And as a founding CEO, I felt like a teenager revisiting the values because I'm like, who am I? Who is this company? Like, how are we changing? What stays the same? What do we throw away? What do we mend? And it was really hard. It was maybe the hardest thing I think I've done in my entire career was deciding what in a company that is, at the time was 12 years old, continues to persevere and what must change, right, for a successful future. And I think the team was really brave. I think we actually had like 3 buckets. It was like keep, mend, throw away, and then we had an add. We added a 4th bucket. So it's like you're going through your closet, like what's my luminary wardrobe. It was very, very cathartic, and I am so glad we did it as a team. I could not have done that alone, nor should I have.
So kind of going into our next question, which we received, and I think it does touch a little bit on our values as well, is how we support professional development within Luminary Labs. And I think that, again, goes back to the dynamic of our team and kind of what our goals and priorities and our interest in having impact at LL.
Okay, so I love this question because I don't know if anyone ever supported me professionally. I had a number of jobs before I started Luminary Labs. And I'll tell you a quick story about like the why I care so much. I did have somebody who was wonderful. After business school, ends up promoting me. This is like back in like 1999, I think, 2000, like .com, like Pika.com. And I was so excited to be in this new role. And then he abruptly left. He got another job. And the team at that company said, Sara, we're going to now demote you. And I was sent back. I was like, what? I didn't know that could happen. I mean, it was just wild, right? And I remember talking to the person who made that decision, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, sometimes to move up, you have to move out. And I was crushed. I was like, really? And to be fair, like there are jobs and times where one does need to move out to move up. And I had to in that company, clearly, right? And it's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but like as, like 2 decades on and plus, I'm like, wow, like what would have happened if somebody said, here's a path for you. Here's what it takes. Here's what, what we're looking for. And so at Luminary Labs, we do a few things. We have a few tools. So one, I really care about, and I think the entire team here cares about trajectory, both here and beyond, knowing that most people are not going to work at one company for the rest of their lives, right? Like who does that? Very few people. So we have to be cognizant about like how we make work mutually beneficial during a tenure. And to the extent people feel comfortable, and you don't have to do this, but if somebody's like, hey, I really want to go to business school in a few years, that's actually helpful to know. And it's like, okay, great. So like, here are the things that we can accomplish together. Or if somebody wants to move across the globe or whatever it is, like understanding context is helpful. Again, not required. But I think those types of dialogues have been really instrumental for team members who've had really incredible trajectories. I love our alumni network. Like, I love hearing what people are up to. And I also love seeing people get promoted and like continue and have great trajectories here. And the way we do it is through a number of tools. So the first is a rubric for every role. So every role will have a very clear rubric. Here's what we're looking for. Here's what it is at the associate level, the senior associate level, et cetera, right? And so those are like things, concrete things we're looking for. You don't have to like hit it across the board. People spike in different ways. But we have this rubric that one can work against. And we're very clear, again, being totally honest and totally kind about, where somebody excels and where there might be gaps. And the second part of this is we go all in on goals every year. So we all have annual goals, and we have this super nerdy, awesome process of like establishing goals with your manager. They need to be mutually beneficial, but they could flex new muscles. Like, oh, wow, I really want to do a little bit more on the business development side. Or, last year I learned that project management is a little harder for me. And so one of my goals this year is to really like run a tight ship on my project, whatever it is, right? And then, here are the resources Luminary Labs can provide me so that I can be successful in my job. And so between the rubric, which is the job itself, and the goals, which are like an articulation of like what you would like to achieve, we bring those together. And that's where that, professional development for me is not just like, are you doing your job? The other tools are the cadence of check-ins. So we have weekly check-ins with your manager, quarterly self-reviews, and then like an annual performance review, which is more formal. But we like every time we're like, oh, should we not do the quarterly self-review? It's a lot of work. We're like, no, I really want to know where I stand. Or I have thoughts, or maybe, gosh, I accomplished that goal. Can I add a new goal? Of course you can. Or something's changed in the universe. I want to shift my goals. That's okay. And that's why we have those quarterly self-reviews. Something more recently that we added in over the past year was a different way to arrive at performance, is like through a calibration exercise to make sure that all managers are using the same language. Like we all have the same rubric right in front of us, but like how are we actually assessing, right? And that has been so helpful. Another thing we started doing, I think, in professional development in the feedback loop is skip level feedback. So giving upward feedback, one level up. For me, that's been game changing. It's like nobody's going to tell you unless somebody asks, right? And so all of our managers receive skip level feedback.
That holistic approach, I think, has been one of the many different things that I've experienced at LO that was a little bit different at other places that I've worked. But I do agree that having those and consistent check-ins is really helpful to know just how you can continue to challenge yourself, not only in your role, but within your projects, and also be able to share learnings both within your own team and also across teams. I feel like we often have many meetings or just touch points after we have these reviews to be able to share and disseminate information amongst all of us. So that's truly one of the best parts about professional development at LO. So we also did receive a question if we consider international talent to join the team and what competencies we look for when we're recruiting.
So we are a New York-based company, so it's really important that folks be New York-based. We're very small, and because we do have that emphasis on like when does place matter, and the team has decided that they want to be in person 2 days a week. We are New York-based and ask that people be New York-based, and that's defined roughly as able to be in New York and be a New York employee. We do not have global talent full-time. We do have partners, subcontractors, subject matter experts that are abroad. The competencies we're looking for when recruiting, I would look at every job description carefully. We, again, in the spirit of being like thoughtful and considered, we really think about what we're looking for, right? What is expected, like when I think about an associate, like there's a desire to synthesize like a lot of information, make order from chaos, or a senior associate, like owning like a larger tranche, maybe running a program, an engagement manager, like you've earned those chops and now you're looking at, different work streams and collaborating, also still rolling up your sleeves like everyone does. Like I still wrote my sleeves. Team says, Sarah, I need you to send these 6 emails or whatever. Like we all do it. But we're very clear about what we're looking for. I think it's important that folks want to be a consultant or try consulting. So if you're earlier in your career, we totally understand. Like consulting is so great. Like I love being an associate 20 years ago because you get basically paid to learn and come up with like great frameworks. It's such a great job and those skills are transferable to so many places. But when you're a little bit more senior and you're like, let's say you're manager and above, it's really important that you love services, right? And I think it is one of those jobs that is it requires like that emotional labor. And like, I love it. Like, I really like helping clients find the pathway, I think nurturing teams and like in their client service trajectory. And so that's something that's really important to us as well, in addition to the things that we're specifically looking for. Somebody also asked about like expanding to Europe, like I'm sensing a global flare. Like I went to business school in Europe and I've lived in a couple of countries, and, I'll never say no to an engagement abroad if it makes sense. And we've worked with clients globally, whether it's a US based or, company from another country. Of a handful that are European based, for example, but they might, operate in Asia. We do work across different countries, but we do not have an expansion plan right now.
We have a lot of attendees from out of the States today.
I know, I love it. But if you have something you want to work on, let me know. I'm very, very interested.
Someone also asked, would you consider Luminary Labs a company where employees can kick off a work-intensive career, or one where they can find a healthy work-family life balance, or both?
Oh, I love this question. I used to think that career choices were binary, that you either worked really hard, or maybe there was a particular income that you're trying to achieve, or you had balance. And, at one point I realized, like, I'm running this company, like, why don't I just make it both? So we agree as a company, like, this is what we want as individuals and as a company, is to have a high impact career while allowing for life, right? And if you're talking about like work family in particular, again, that's one of the nice things about service businesses. If you right size the job, you are working those client hours. And I'm going to say this, nobody believes me, so you just ask employees, like, hit them up. We do not email nights and weekends like that. We do everything possible to right size the job, right size meetings, scope out our work so we can get it done in that 40 to 45 hours a week. Are there times it goes up, dials up 50, whatever? That's sure, absolutely. But that, like a very heavy week is not steady state. One of the ways I did this is when I was pregnant, like I was like the queen of like burning the midnight oil before I had a family. And somebody had to tell me, like, Sarah, you need to practice going home at like a reasonable hour. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, you just need to rethink how you do everything. Eventually you'll be like dropping off and picking up and all that kind of stuff. And so what I did, and I wrote a piece about this, and I don't know if you have this link handy, but it was in Fast Company. I piloted my family leave with our clients because they were also expecting me to be on 24/7, right? And so I took a vacation where we just pretended I was gone. I like set the team up with everything they needed, and then I figured out where the flaws were and fixed that. And then by the time I went out on family leave, it was like everyone could run, and I actually took a real family leave. I won't lie, I like actually missed work, but like I was happily at home as well. So I was like, nobody's emailing me because like they wanted me to have family leave. But I enjoyed it. And I said, well, okay, so how do we make that something that's not just for me, that like everyone can enjoy? And so it's really important to us. Like we had somebody just come back from leave, and it always sounds like it's going to be this big deal. And then like it goes so fast, right? And if you design to have everyone's back and you're thoughtful and you think about structuring it, and we're transparent about what needs are going to come up, whether you're caring for a family member, you're going on family leave, it's possible. So like, I don't accept that it's not possible. I'm also, since I wrote that piece many, many years ago, the world has changed. Like, one of the reasons I love being a New York based company is New York paid family leave is pretty awesome. So one of the most progressive in the country. Still, we have a long way to go, I think, as a country, but I'm really happy about that. And so we have a number of families here. And also, if you don't have family and like you just want to, like, I don't know, go home, go for a run, whatever it is you do. PTO. Yeah, like sick means sick. Like if you're sick, it's funny because like the pandemic's changed a lot of that. Actually, maybe not even for the better, because before the pandemic, if you were sick and you tried to dial into like a call, like we would like sidebar and be like, you need to like get off the call. You're sick and we want you to recover. And people were like, what do you mean? Or like, we would send people home. We were like, you don't look well. Like, I think you really need to rest. And like, we've got it. Like, that's where collaboration comes in, and that like radical like transparency around where are things, how do we work together so that like we can pick it up for you. And, but I think in the pandemic, everyone's home. And frankly, I think a lot of people are working, maybe even more when they're like fully remote. And I think it's something the world is going to have to like really, we're going to have to like figure out together, like what, and maybe every company is different, right? Like maybe you just make those different choices for yourself and your organization.
Absolutely. Definitely echoing the transparency and intentionality aspect of our work there too. So we do have one of our open positions is the Director of Future of Work and Education. So what is your vision for an ideal applicant for that position?
Yeah, so we established these focus areas last year. And again, they are the future of health, scientific discovery, future of work and education, and infrastructure. And the idea is that, these bodies of work are now robust enough, and the engagements are expanding in a really beautiful way across the private sector, public sector, and nonprofits, that we have a vision for each of these. And so the director for a given focus area, in this case, the future of work and education, is really responsible for furthering that vision, right? Where can we take this portfolio of work? And we've been in this space now for, I guess, since 2014. It's almost a decade, like not even, well, I guess 8 years maybe or so, right? On the education side, health more than a decade. How do you take this body of work, the problems that are existing in the world, and like further what we're working on? And the second part of it, and a lot of people ask that, they're like, well, I'm an expert in the future of work or education. Again, that can be true. Do you want to be a consultant? Like, do you truly love services? It's really important. Like, that is a person not just who can consult. We can all consult. Like, I was not a consultant before I was a consultant, and it took me a while to like figure out how to be a good consultant. I'm still working on that. And for me, a very, very strong consultant who's leading a focus area does two things. One, leads the team. So that's professional development, inspiring trajectory, helping people bring their best selves to work, and delighting that client, right? By bringing that in, and then managing the work. So leading people, managing the work. So that's the quality of the work, quality of thought, timeliness. And so it is somebody who has done this probably for some time. That's why you'll see like the number of years of experience are important. It is probably more important for somebody to have the vision than necessarily have a very deep background in education or a very deep background in the future of work. Like, that's helpful. But we also believe that outside thinking can be helpful. In fact, some of our clients prefer when we don't have a background. I'm not set on that. Like, if somebody had a wonderful education background, I'm like, that's great, bonus, right? But really being able to lead a team and manage the portfolio of work under a vision and furthering that vision.
So kind of going off of the client aspect, what are some qualities that you look for in a client and when you're choosing projects? And if you can think of one, what's a project that you've said no to and why?
Man, you guys are bringing the good questions. Very luminary. So the qualities we look for in a client is, one, is it really for us? Right? Can anybody else do it? If anybody else could do it, why would we want to do it? Right. And I think that it's one of the challenges of a small service-based organization is that, like, yes, you could do many things, but is it really something that we want to do, that we have the capabilities that the team is excited about? I think in terms of the client, we like to say that we work with innovation mavericks. So whether the organization is highly innovative or not, the clients are. So, we work with a lot of federal agencies. We work with large regulated organizations, and people say, how do you innovate there? I'm like, I actually find that like wildly interesting. Like, I love Nike. I love, tech companies, and innovating for those organizations looks one way. But like, if you could innovate for like the US Department of, and like pick your favorite agency or a regulated organization, you can one, you could impact the lives of millions of people. And like I said, we really like things even when they're hard. So climbing that mountain for me is like so exciting. We look for honesty. We look for clients that are going to be transparent and kind to us. So like, the other day we had an issue. We're like, okay, let's just jump on the phone. Like, just tell us straight. What's a big deal? What's not a big deal? Or like how, help us navigate the why. And like the client that like is quick to explain the why and the rationale, like we love that. And it helps us bring our best selves and our best work, right? I could talk about our clients forever. We should do that, a Q&A with our clients.
That would be a lot of fun. Yeah, definitely.
I've always wanted to do a summit with our like client projects. That's a whole other project. Sorry.
So another common concern within consulting firms is scope creep, which is clients expecting new or different things for a project or a deliverable. So how does Luminary Labs prevent scope creep and level set expectations throughout our projects?
Well, it always starts with a tight scope, right? The contract you sign, like everybody if you've ever consulted, your first consulting agreement is like, I will provide consulting services. And you quickly learn that it's really important to, detail the timelines, the phases, the deliverables, right? We're very fortunate. Many of our clients require that. So our government work is very, very detailed, right? And they cannot ask for more, right? And we cannot deliver less. And we've learned to really appreciate that in a way that is still highly innovative and allows the flexibility to be iterative as appropriate. And I think like sometimes it does happen though, right? Like sometimes the client's like, oh, you did such a great job. Can you just like design this other thing? And, I think there's an exercise where we think about like, is it, how big is it? Like, how big is that ask? If it's a very small ask, sometimes there are low lift, high impact things that are totally worth it. You rather than just being firm and saying, no, we're not going to do X, Y, Z, sometimes it's really where it's to the benefit of the program it will drive impact. And sometimes it's asking too much. I will also say as a woman-owned small business, we get asked all the time, cut your rates, deliver more. And someday when I'm retired, I will write the book, like all the other things that happen. And you have to be very clear about like, it has to be a win-win, right? And we are a for-profit organization and we pay our employees, and it does not make sense to run a program if it's going to be at cost. And that's the nature of business, right? So I do, again, at some point I will write that book about, I don't know, actually, if you're a woman-founded business and you're looking for advice, like hit me up. I'm always glad to share the pro tips. And then later I'll write the book.
We'll be waiting for this book for sure. So I'll turn to our last question now, which is something that we always talk about at Luminary Labs because there are very things that would only happen here. But every organization has a story that defines them. If you had a story that illustrates only at Luminary Labs does this happen, what would that be?
Okay, I have a few stories. So one is, again, around this idea of thoughtfulness. I sometimes forget that we live in our own happy bubble. Like, it's a wonderful bubble. Everyone is so thoughtful. And then you engage with people in their organizations and you're like, oh my gosh, like that's how that works. So when we moved offices, and we've moved offices a number of times, we did a group exercise. What do we want to take with us and what do we want to leave behind? And it started with the physical. We had these two couches, these wonderful Chesterfield couches that like carried with us over a number of offices. And we realized they just weren't going to fit. And we were going to have to say goodbye to the couches. And then it transcended to the, more values and norms that we wanted to bring with us. And like, it was this breaking point. We're like, is there something that we actually want to leave behind? And a friend of mine who's a venture capitalist, I was explaining this to her, and she's like one of the only like female VCs in her firm. And she's like, oh my gosh, only at Luminary Labs would that happen. She's like, I would never, like my company would never even entertain this like, borderline like spiritual discussion of like, what do we take with us when we like move to our new office? I think another one is, and this comes up every time, is like, years ago we put in place a 401k plan, which I'm so proud of. Like, you can be a small company and still have these benefits. It's really important to us. And again, like, we're super nerdy. And normally when, your representative comes to talk about like health insurance or 401k plan, like people are like, okay, they might have one or two questions, or barely anyone even shows up. But at Luminary Labs, the 401k guy, he comes in at 9 a.m. and we are just like peppering him with questions. And like, we adore him. He knows us. And he's been promoted now over the years. And so he always tells like the next person, like, FYI, these people are going to grill you. And like, we ask about like the ethical considerations of a fund or performance. And, like, there's always somebody who might be had like a finance background and they're like asking a targeted question. And it's really wonderful. I think, we've gotten in the habit of like letting, any service know that like, you're not just coming in, it's going to be the same old, we're going to ask questions. A couple other things, like if you've ever been to one of our holiday parties, which we haven't had for a few years, in the fullest sense, but we invite, all of our alums. We always have a Fermi problem. And it could be anything. It's always fun. Like, we super nerd out on that. I mean, even for fun, like we have this fancy coffee machine that it will actually tabulate. We found out later, like you could tabulate exactly how many coffees have ever been made since we got it. And so we were like, okay, how many coffees have we ever made? And like, only the office manager knew the answer. So we'll do things like that. We also do trivia quite regularly. It could be trivia about the world. It could be trivia about celebrities. Naomi is very good at trivia. So like, if she's on your team, you're going to win. But we also do trivia about each other. So, when you like let it out that like, maybe you took a motorcycle maintenance class, or your first job was, being a mascot for like a professional sports team, like we will remember that and it will show up in Leopardy, which is Luminary Labs Jeopardy, but not officially because that would be trademark infringement. How's that? That's forced. I'm sorry, that was way too much.
No, those were incredible. And I think the Luminary Labs employees have the best memory. So anything that you say during trivia will be remembered for sure.
Amazing. Yeah.
And Lisa Marie, one of our coworkers, also sent a beautiful couple of things that also are very LL for her. So feel free to read those as well. But we are almost at time. So just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. We are hoping to do similar events like these in the future, possibly virtual again. But feel free to go onto our website and you can sign up for the lab report to stay up to date on all of our events, virtual and non-virtual, as well as our job openings as well. And Jessica has also dropped the link for our open positions, so you can check them out or share them with those who may be interested. And Sarah, if you have any parting words, feel free. It was so nice to be in conversation with you today.
I love this. I could do this like every week. Don't worry, I won't make us do it every week, but I really love seeing questions and hearing from people. One thing, if you are looking for your next career move, I always share that like only you know your true north, and like really figure out what makes the music sing inside of you is like the best thing to do. So if working at Luminary Labs is part of that, like we'd love to see your resume and application. Cover letters matter. We do care about cover letters. But also being honest with yourself about what you want. So sending you forth to whatever your path may hold. And thank you so much for spending your noon hour with us today, or wherever.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.